Redcliff's was the largest soldier settlement in Australia after the First World War, and I think it still is today. There was approximately 700 soldiers. A lot of those found that they're going too tough. It wasn't a very good living. You had 15 acres, you had the elements against you, rain, frost, droughts. They had to be cleared by them. Now that would have been a great shock to these chaps, because a lot of them come from Melbourne and cities and towns. They didn't know what the hell they were up against. The first couple of years that was that tough that a lot of them left the land because they couldn't make a living. Those that stuck it out, and they were rewarded later on with the dried fruit.
The soldiers that were returning all had injuries. If they weren't physical injuries, they were mental injuries, and they really needed a chance to recover from all of that. So it was not easy, but they soon established all the things that made life a lot easier for them. There weren't only men. There was one woman, a nurse, allocated land, and there were two other nurses who took up land soon after the neighbouring person was not able to manage. So we had, and often we had lots of women really doing a lot of the work, just the properties were in their husband's name.
Some of them had been married to English ladies, so they brought their brides home in just humpies, which was a real downturn for some of these women. So it must have been quite a cultural shock to them.
My grandfather was a soldier settler in 1921 and took up a property, of which our family has lived on in various ways for nearly 100, well now for 100 years. Although I never knew my grandfather, he had worked in the war in signalling, and my grandfather was fortunate to be able to work the land, even though he had been gassed, and he did live through to into his 50s. I really feel for the early settlers who had to work with horses, virtually with their hands for nearly every task. It was very hard work, and in summertime, extremely difficult. In Redcliffs, it can be over 40 degrees quite often for a period through the harvest time. The original settlers, all soldiers, many of them had served at Gallipoli, like my grandfather, and so they had a wealth of experience to help them in developing the early township of Redcliffs. A lot of them were absolutely full of fun as well, and there's stories told of some of the antics that they got up to, like putting gelicanite in 44-gallon drums, and so they had a great time, even though it was a serious time for them developing their lives. And of course, it wasn't only just the soldiers who settled here. We had people coming in the township. We had Chinese and ethnic groups that were represented in the development of the township, which grew very quickly. It started on the other side of the railway line, on the western side, as a tent town, and very soon it became a thriving community on the other side of the line, where permanent buildings were established. Redcliffe started with around 700 soldiers, plus the townsfolk, of course, but our population now is heading towards 5,000 and growing rapidly. There's a number of subdivisions, and so in that 100 years, the town has changed dramatically, and those early soldiers would be absolutely amazed to see that development.